Do you ever find yourself in a spot like this? Kind of precarious, kind of dangerous, and also kind of foolish because you got yourself into this mess. That's me. I can remember as a kid times that my father or grandfather, somebody would be working on a project with a big ladder, and when they weren't looking, I'd think, I'll climb up, I want to go up there, and then getting way up to that height, realizing I was afraid to get down, and I had gotten myself into this danger. Or maybe you found yourself literally painted into a corner. I found myself one time putting stain on the wooden floor of our back patio, and found that I was just on the verge of getting myself painted into a corner and not wanting to have to step on where the wood was still wet. There are these times in life where this is us, where we've gotten ourselves into trouble, and what makes it especially difficult is we know we've gotten ourselves into the mess. What amazes me, the more time I spend in the scriptures, is that God, as we meet God in the Bible, both in the Hebrew scriptures and in the stories of Jesus in the New Testament as well, is that Jesus' help isn't just for people who got into trouble beyond their control, or people who were victims and didn't intend to get themselves in trouble, but that Jesus shows up to offer help. God is there over and over again for people who've gotten themselves up a ladder, or painted into a corner, or up a creek, who've created their own trouble, and yet Jesus meets them there anyway. We often say on Sunday mornings, in some words of confession as we pray, we admit that we're captive to sin and can't free ourselves. But if we're really honest, we keep shackling ourselves to sin too. We get ourselves into that trouble as well, over and over and over again. And it feels like we're way up high on a wobbly ladder and realize we shouldn't have gotten up there in the first place. Jesus meets us here. This coming Sunday, we're going to hear this amazing story about Jesus and his disciples. His disciples have gotten into a boat. Jesus is going to hang back separately. He needs some time by himself. And a storm comes up on this lake, the Sea of Galilee. And his disciples are all afraid and they're freaking out. And they see this figure coming toward them on the water. It's Jesus walking on the water. And if that weren't enough, then Simon Peter blurts out, if it's really you, Jesus, call me up out onto the water and I'll walk on the water with you. No, nobody needed this, right? This is not a necessary situation. Nobody required Peter to come out. This is Peter getting himself into greater danger. This is Peter climbing up on the high wobbly ladder. Peter painting himself into a corner, getting himself up the creek without a paddle. And Jesus says, fine, come on out. And there, when Peter's out on the water, for a brief instant, he's walking as long as his eyes are locked on Jesus. But the moment he starts to fear, the moment he looks down at his feet or realizes just what he's gotten himself into, he starts to shake. He starts to fear. He starts to drown. And at that point, this is where me in my most petty moments would say, well, told you so. You shouldn't have gotten yourself into trouble, Pete. You shouldn't have asked for that. You shouldn't have gone out into danger. Stay safe where it is. Nobody needed you to come out walking on the water. But Jesus meets him where he is, even where that's a trouble of Peter's own doing. We're going to hear this Sunday, too, a story about a prophet named Elijah who runs and is so afraid and is so sad because he feels like he's the only one being faithful to God, that not only is he being hunted by the authorities, but he's worked himself up into this sort of depressive episode of, woe is me, nobody's out there, I'm all alone. Again, God meets him there, and instead of smacking him upside the head and immediately going, Elijah, get over it, there's lots of people who are still faithful to me, you're not the only one, don't throw yourself a pity party. God meets him there in the sound of sheer silence. God meets him there and whispers, I'm with you and you are not alone. I'll meet you even in the midst of the pity party you were throwing yourself. I'll meet you even when you got yourself worked up into more trouble than you needed to be in. That's how God works. You know, for a lot of people, They may have this assumption that if there's a God and if God is real, then God may be just there for the helpless, innocent victims, but that when you've gotten yourself into trouble, it's just fair justice. You're just desserts when you find yourself dealing with the consequences, painted into a corner or up on a ladder and afraid to get down. But we keep meeting a God in the Scriptures who even finds us when we've gotten ourselves into worse trouble and loves us still. And says, I'm with you, and it will be okay. It's a hand to Peter to pull him up out of the water. It's a voice that meets Elijah when he is in the midst of his own pity party and can't hear anything else. It's the presence of Christ that meets us where we are, even when we've gotten ourselves into bigger trouble than was necessary. That's the conversation we're exploring this coming Sunday. We invite you to be a part of it. See you Sunday.